Every day on this channel, I cover everything Elon said on X in the last 24 hours. And here's how many times Elon posted about each subject today. I will cover everything he said about each topic before moving on to the next one. And starting with SpaceX, there was a narrative going around the other day that SpaceX was worth $800 billion in a recent round of funding. And this thread starts with Sam Corris, who said, if for some reason you're randomly wondering what SpaceX might be worth, here's ARK's open source model. Kathy Wood quoted it saying, in collaboration with Mach 33, ARK Invest open sourced its SpaceX model, the only open source model in the market, if I am not mistaken, which should help put into perspective the massive opportunities even before solar-powered data centers in space. Elon replied saying a major additional factor should be considered: satellites with localized AI compute, where just the results are beamed back from low latency sun-synchronous orbit, will be the lowest cost way to generate AI bit streams in less than 3 years. And by far the fastest way to scale within 4 years, because easy sources of electrical power are already hard to find on Earth. 1 megaton a year of satellites with 100 kilowatts per satellite yields 100 gigawatts of AI added per year, with no operating or maintenance cost, connecting via high bandwidth lasers to the Starlink constellation. The level beyond that is constructing satellite factories on the moon and using a mass driver, like an electromagnetic railgun, to accelerate AI satellites to lunar escape velocity without the need for rockets. That scales to more than 100 terawatts a year of AI and enables non-trivial progress towards becoming a Kardashev 2 civilization, or a civilization that harnesses all the energy of our star. Brett Winton replied saying, yes, we plan to update this work. Presumably SpaceX would own and operate the compute array, with Tesla as a probable chip supplier, xAI as one of many potential customers. Elon said once there are lunar factories, robots and mass drivers on the moon, such that the entire loop is closed, the system probably decouples from conventional currencies and operates autonomously in watts and tonnage. And then Apo Structura quoted Elon saying that he's talking about sending 1 megaton of Starlink satellites for AI compute to orbit per year. For context, we send about 3,000 tons to orbit annually, and most of it is already SpaceX. 1 megaton would mean 25 plus Starship launches a day. Blaze replied saying he did say Starship would launch 24 times in 24 hours before, so it checks out. He's been telling us the plan the entire time. Elon said yes. And the Shopify CEO replied saying, you binged on Dyson Sphere program last weekend, didn't you? Elon said, didn't realize that was a video game. Is it fun? ARK Raiders is pretty good, by the way. And Apo Structura also said that there's this recurring narrative that SpaceX needs government funding to survive. Not only does SpaceX not rely on government contracts for the majority of its revenue, it's actually saved the US government billions of dollars by being far cheaper than the competition. Here's why SpaceX is a game changer for NASA. This is the estimated cost per seat for astronauts on selected spacecraft, and you can see the most cost-efficient option is the SpaceX Dragon 2, by a lot. Elon said, true. In fact, Doge Designer points out that NASA will provide under 5% of SpaceX revenue next year, and SpaceX earned its contracts by offering the best product at the lowest price, and it is the only astronaut transport option that meets NASA safety standards. And Elon reposted this, and he then shared a photo of the rockets of the world, and you can see Starship stacked on its booster is the largest rocket in the world. And there's a reason we keep talking about where SpaceX revenue is coming from, as Peter Bannon is on the air talking about SpaceX's valuation, saying that it's 100% government contracts, calling it crony capitalism. Readers added context saying this is not true. Commercial Starlink service accounts for the majority of SpaceX revenue. Elon said back to prison for Bannon. And Starlink direct to sell hits Latam, and Chile claims first signal. Chile just became the first in Latin America to text straight through space, and Elon reposted that. And moving on to xAI, Elon says that Grok 420 is coming out in 3 or 4 weeks, as Grok Codefast 1 still sits atop Open Router. And live at the xAI hackathon, over 500 hand-picked developers, only a few hours in, and many great projects built already. First place winners for each track include an all-expensed trip to Starship launch, and Elon reposted this. And it's actually a 24-hour hackathon, and it's underway right now in the San Francisco Bay Area. And Grok saved a man's life in Norway. I told you guys about this story yesterday. The man credits Grok AI for saving him from appendix rupture as the ER doctor didn't think there was anything wrong with him, but he kept telling Grok his symptoms, and Grok told him to go and insist at the hospital at getting a scan promptly, and it saved his life. And Andrei Karpathy said, don't think of large language models as entities, but as simulators. For example, when exploring a topic, don't ask, what do you think about XYZ? There is no you. Next time try, what would be a good group of people to explore XYZ? What would they say? The language model can channel or simulate many perspectives, but it hasn't thought about XYZ for a while, and over time, and formed its own opinions in the way we're used to. If you force it via the use of you, it will give you something by adopting a personality embedding vector implied by the statistics of its fine-tuning data and then simulate that. It's fine to do, but there is a lot less mystique to it than I find people naively attribute to asking an AI. Elon replied saying, interesting. And let's get a sneak peek at the Tesla holiday update here.
Hey Grok, I want to go on a tour of San Francisco. Could you take me to the Ferry Building, Pier 39, and Golden Gate Park?
Heading to the Ferry Building first, then Pier 39 and Golden Gate Park. Should take about an hour total with traffic.
Cool, thanks.
So as you guys saw there, Grok is now integrated with navigation commands in your Tesla. Elon quoted that saying, try Grok. And Elon said, exawatts, or you're not really trying. An exawatt is an enormous unit of power. It's 1 million terawatts and 1 billion gigawatts. And moving on from technology, X is now the #1 news app in all 27 EU countries, as the EU Commission recently fined X for not partnering with them in their content moderation practices. Inevitable West said Europe won't go down without a fight, as they all are downloading X. Elon said, cool. Doge Designer says, remember that X was the only platform that refused the secret censorship deal the EU offered while other platforms accepted it. Elon said, yup. And if you missed the last couple days, the EU was fining X for deceptive design of its blue check mark, a lack of transparency of its advertising repository, and failure to provide access to public data for researchers. Mr. King said Americans probably don't know the European Commission is an unelected executive body of the European Union that also has the sole authority to propose legislation for the EU. The EU Parliament merely ratifies or rejects things. So the Commission proposes the rules and enforces them and reviews objections. Judge, jury, and executioner. The commissioners themselves are appointed by the member states. Below them is a civil service of roughly 30,000 bureaucrats who do things like suggest fines on companies like X. Citizens of the various EU countries have no direct control over what the Commission does. They can't vote them out or object to what they do. A person in Madrid or Paris or Berlin or Warsaw is powerless. The Commission is funded from the coffers of the member states but doesn't answer to the taxpayers. The Commission has a large incentive to fine American companies like X because those revenues supplement whatever they receive from the member states. It's free money for them to boost their authority and lifestyle in Brussels. In the USA, we complain correctly about the deep state, but they've got it much worse in Europe. Add to the lack of accountability to citizens of EU countries the fact that Eurocrats work with American NGOs and outfits funded by people like Soros, and the picture is even darker. The EU bureaucrats are part of a transnational agenda that isn't required to be concerned about the interests of EU citizens. And Elon reposted that. And he said again, we're now #1 in every EU country. And Alice Smith said the fourth Reich, where the EU logo is being contrasted with the Nazi symbol. Elon said pretty much. And Renew Europe posted that Musk wants to break up the EU. Putin wants a weaker EU. China wants to divide the EU. Trump wants a far-right EU. We want a stronger EU. Are you with us? Elon said you don't even have good propaganda. And he then tagged, I find retards. Mike Lee said we've fought and won wars to escape European tyranny. Now we need to stop subsidizing it. Elon said yes. And back in October, the European Commission posted freedom to love, freedom to be. Today we've adopted our new LGBT equality strategy, focusing on protecting people from violence, ensuring equal rights, and advancing equality for all. Be who you are and love who you want. Katie Miller said the EU is still pushing to trans their children. The EU is all in on supporting trans men with pregnancies. The EU allows and encourages men to play in women's sports. Elon replied with 2 exclamation marks. And Lars says, it is interesting how X is being flooded with anti-European propaganda. Is there a reason? I would have a look in Moscow. An XAI employee said, in my opinion, there is little anti-European propaganda. The EU has become an ideological echo chamber, and anyone who dares to speak up is branded as some sort of lunatic. Elon said 100. He said the European Union is not democracy, rule of the people, but rather bureaucracy, rule of the unelected bureaucrat. But Janice says the EU is under attack from all sides. Russian warmongers are joining forces with American tech bros and Europe-hating mega politicians. It feels like the EU is the last bastion of sanity in an ocean of lies, propaganda, and corruption where only might is right. Sean McGuire said, you have no idea how brainwashed you are. Robin quoted Sean saying 99.9% of people are completely unaware of how brainwashed they are. Sean said this is true, and includes myself. There are many topics where I was brainwashed at some point and then realized later on. I'm sure there are many topics where I'm still brainwashed. Elon said, true. And in response to the EU's fine of X, a member of the European Parliament said, not in my name. I absolutely oppose this act of the EU Commission. It is an act of censorship and war against the free speech. EU Commission is pushing EU into totalitarianism. This is against all the basic values and against the basic acts on which EU has been founded. As member of European Parliament, I call EU Commission to resign. Elon replied with some flames. And when Elon Musk calls for European Union to be disbanded, Marvin says that Elon is beginning to pose an existential threat to European freedom and sovereignty. David Vance quoted that saying European Union is beginning to pose an existential threat to European freedom and sovereignty. And Elon reposted that. And Viv says EU's own opinion with all the gold stars, but user reviews just 1 star. Elon says LMAO. He says that X is seeing record-breaking downloads in many countries in Europe, and this French politician says the fine imposed by the European Commission represents 0.028% of Elon Musk's fortune, but if he delays in paying it, the amount could rise very quickly, very high. Let him stop insulting Europeans and pay what he owes. Elon replied saying, I'm a big fan of Europe, but not bureaucrats like you who are smothering the continent. Alice Smith says it's hilarious to read all these tweets by Europeans telling US citizens to stay out of European politics. These are the same Europeans who have spent every waking moment over the last decade obsessively tweeting against Trump. Elon said, indeed, so many politicians in Europe who are traitors to their own people. And the vice president of Renew Europe said many MAGA and other far-right people like Elon and J.D. Vance accuse EU of suppression of free speech. The facts are very different. Europe is a bastion of free speech. But another trait of the far right is never let facts get in the way of conspiracies and populism, as he shows the countries with most freedom of press, Norway being in first and the Americans being in 57th. Data Republican replies saying, let me lay out something your NGOs never account for, yet more of your own citizens are beginning to understand. Americans have stepped away from NGO-crafted freedom indices that always crown the same governments as enlightened. We see the pattern. We no longer treat these rankings as neutral data or as credible authority because they are not. Their metrics shift to suit their narrative, and the narrative always protects their preferred states, the compliant states of globalists. The experts you cite are losing legitimacy because the public now sees through them. Their push for tighter control over speech is not a sign of strength. It is a sign of fear. I pray your nations choose to claim the principles that protect open expression and personal agency in the United States. The world is freer when people, not institutions, decide what may be said and what may be believed. Elon said America has freedom of speech as part of its constitution. In Europe, speech is routinely suppressed without people even knowing. As described above, left-wing NGOs pushing propaganda mean less than nothing. Only a fool would think otherwise. Eva said if the EU actually cared about democracy, they should establish a mechanism for a binding referendum on its future trajectory. Let the people decide whether they want to remain within the current framework, exit entirely, or at least reduce competences. Vox populi, vox Dei, which is a Latin phrase meaning the voice of the people is the voice of God. Elon says, good idea. And the fact that X is now the #1 news app in every single EU nation after they've tried to censor people on X, Elon notes it is the Streisand effect. A phenomenon where you try to censor something actually draws more attention to it. And Consumer Choice says the massive EU fine against Elon and X is about nothing more than control. The US must stand up against the Brussels effect. And Elon reposted this. And a gentle reminder to everyone as to what the old Twitter verification looked like, in case people forgot. Twitter verification has a price tag, $15,000. Those little blue checks don't come cheap if you aren't a household name. That was the old Twitter. Elon said, yup, and this is Europe, and this is the EU, just Brussels and Strasbourg. Elon said the tyrannical, unelected bureaucracy oppressing the people of Europe are in the second picture, Brussels and Strasbourg. Yesterday, Elon said, how long before the EU is gone? Abolish the EU. And Drew said, I personally want the EU to exist, but as an actual Western civilization bloc rather than as a mere vehicle for advancing leftism. Elon said then the head of the EU needs to be directly elected by the people, and only the EU Parliament should have the power to propose legislation. And the other day we saw this post. Imagine you love so much being governed that you want a government for your government, referring to what's going on in Europe. And Elon had a laugh at it. So then a member of the EU said, Musk is really stupid. Don't you know that in the US there is a state and a federal government? Richard quoted that saying, Helmut is a corrupt politician. He and his wife have helped themselves to stashes of cash. He doesn't give a shit about the public. He's only interested in protecting his position at the pig trough. Helmut said, you are a liar. Give me your real name and an address for my lawyer. Matt Moore said the year is 2025 and members of the EU Parliament are publicly begging random users on X for their personal identification information so they can try and sue them. What in the living is going on in Europe? Elon said, nuts. And we saw this graphic visual earlier, countries with the most freedom of press that some of the members of the EU were posting around. Natalie said, I'm seeing so many people from the EU share this post. It's only about press freedom. It doesn't say anything about free speech for the individual. It does not cover whether ordinary citizens can post memes, insults, or controversial opinions online without punishment, or hate speech laws applied to private individuals, arrests or fines for offensive social media posts. Once again, the EU is spreading lies, and Elon reposted that. And Meta has a blue check mark saying, protect your brand with Meta verified. Unblogged said, hello EU. How is this different than X? Elon said, good question. Mario said the EU isn't a democracy, it's a bureaucratic coup in slow motion. He says, ask yourself, if you can't vote them out, if you can't change the direction, if your parliament can't legislate without permission, is that really democracy or just tyranny with better branding? Elon said, throw off the yoke of bureaucracy. And let's hear from Elon on his Twitter purchase.
I didn't do the purchase because I thought it was a great way to make money, or because, I thought it would improve my quality of living, because frankly, I knew that there would be a zillion slings and arrows coming in my direction, because the woke mind virus and various other sort of falsities are not going to take it lying down. And I could just end up being killed by some crazy person that is an effective arm of the mind virus. So, but it really, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but it really felt like there was a civilizational danger, that unless one of the major online platforms broke ranks, then because they're all just behaving in lockstep, along with the legacy media, just everyone saying the same thing, and so there's literally there was just no place to actually get the truth. It was almost impossible. So everything was just getting censored. The power of the censorship apparatus was incredible.
Elon said that is why. And JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon says that Europe has driven business out, driven investment out, and driven innovation out. Now this is not Elon Musk, this is Jamie Dimon saying that. And Elon said he's right. Mike Lee says this is our flag. It stands for, we're tired of subsidizing European socialism. And Elon replied with 2 American flags. Now, breaking news. X has terminated the European Commission's ad account. The EU paid to promote its announcement on X. And I'm talking about this announcement when they fined X. They actually paid to promote their announcement that they fined X. And Doge Designer says they used a trick that disguised a link as a video so the ad would get extra reach. They fined X for being deceptive while using a deceptive method to push their own ad. XFreeze also reported on this, saying that the ad function had never been abused like this before. And Elon reposted that and Doge Designer's one as well. And so Nikita Beer quoted the original announcement, and he said the irony of your announcement is you logged into your dormant ad account, and Nikita Beer is the head of product at X, by the way, to take advantage of an exploit in our ad composer to post a link that deceives users into thinking it's a video and to artificially increase its reach. As you may be aware, X believes everyone should have an equal voice on our platform. However, it seems you believe that the rules should not apply to your account. Your ad account has been terminated, and Elon reposted that. And Austin Allred says, I still think that buying Twitter will be the most important thing Elon has ever done. And Elon said it had to be done to shore up civilization. And Gad Saad said, let me reiterate, Elon Musk saved free speech. And Elon replied with a heart. Now, moving on from this X story, President Trump has other matters to address that are going on in Europe.
Europe is in serious trouble. They've been invaded by a force of illegal aliens like nobody's ever seen before. Illegal aliens are pouring into Europe. Nobody's doing anything to change it, to get them out. It's not sustainable. And because they choose to be politically correct, they're doing just absolutely nothing about it. And I have to say, I look at London, where you have a terrible mayor, terrible mayor. And it's been so changed. Now they want to go to Sharia law. But you're in a different country. You can't do that. Both the immigration and their suicidal energy ideas will be the death of Western Europe if something is not done immediately. This cannot be sustained. What makes the world so beautiful is that each country is unique. But to stay this way, every sovereign nation must have the right to control their own borders. You have the right to control your borders.
And Elon reposted that. And Daily Romania reports that at least 400,000 children, women, and men have been killed or raped by non-European migrants and refugees since 2010. It's a genocide of ethnic Europeans sponsored by the EU and those who support it. This is what I mean when I say the EU is anti-European. So Elon says, when does it become a genocide? And he also replied to it with a Grok analysis of the post. And the grooming transcripts referring to the grooming gangs in the UK are rife with girls being targeted for being white. This is what white girls are for, is an example. Aggravated sentencing can be pursued for racially motivated crimes. Yet this doesn't seem to have happened in a single case. Why did the Crown Prosecution Service not pursue those charges? Elon says, good question. And viewer discretion is advised. 7 Somali undocumented migrants jailed for gang raping a 13-year-old British girl in their taxpayer-funded hotel room, Bristol. Elon replied with 2 exclamation marks. And the shocking thing reading the grooming gang rape accounts was like, oh, he kidnapped her and then called his neighbor to join the rape, and then his cousin, and then they brought her back and stored her in the family basement. Everyone in the community was in on it. Orrin McIntyre says, I really hate to break this to people, but your morality is not self-evident to people who do not share your moral tradition. They will rape your daughters, they will invite their friends, and then they will mock you for being stupid enough to let them in. Elon said this has happened so many times. And Enoch Burke lodges an appeal from his prison cell. He spent over 500 days in jail, and what was his crime? He was the young school teacher who refused to call a student they, them. All he wants to do is educate, yet he's in chains for refusing to indoctrinate, and Elon reposted this. And some of the violence in the United States geared against some of the right-wing voices in our nation is escalating. Tim Pool says, last night a vehicle approached our property and opened fire. No one was hurt. Our security team is reviewing the incident and will be relaying the report to appropriate law enforcement. This is the price we pay for speaking out against evil. And Benny Johnson said, this man showed up at my home where my wife and children live. He was ranting about me and went door to door in my neighborhood trying to find me, terrifying my neighbors. We believe he was armed and fled before the cops arrived. He then explicitly and publicly threatened the lives of Matt Walsh and his wife and children. He recently showed up at Cat Turd's home ranting and raving about me and Matt Walsh and Laura Loomer. Thank you to the FBI and Department of Justice for investigating these threats and swiftly arresting the stalker. He was clearly spiraling in a very dangerous way. I don't like to speak publicly about this kind of stuff because it involves my family and their security. I'm sick over it, but I have an obligation to amplify this case as it is one of multiple ongoing criminal prosecutions for threats against my family. Over the past year, I've watched my president get shot in the head and my friend get assassinated. Things are spiraling wildly out of control. There are real-world consequences for psychotic rhetoric and lies amplified online. Enough. If you are threatening my family, expect me to fight back with full force. There is nothing I wouldn't do to protect my family. I would gladly die for them. This is good versus evil, darkness versus light. The battle is spiritual. With Christ, we will win. Jack quoted it saying, "The violent left is coming to kill, and they aren't stopping." Elon said 100. And Gunther Eagleman posted that Charlie wasn't killed because he spoke. He was killed because our children were listening. Elon said, "True." And Matt Walsh quoted what Benny Johnson said, and he said, "Yeah, this guy made very graphic, violent threats against my children and my wife. I won't repeat or post them, though others have. We get a lot of threats, but this was different. It's getting bad out there. People are becoming completely unhinged, and it will only get worse from here." Elon replied with 2 exclamation marks. And this guy said that we have to exterminate white people off the face of the planet to solve this problem. Lauren Shen said if he said this about any other race, he would be debanked, deplatformed, disavowed, and lose all professional contracts and maybe even be arrested. Elon said it's not okay. Valentina said, what if a white person said this about black people? Imagine the national outrage. Elon said he is advocating extermination of whites. The rabbit hole says that the term far right has been so broadly applied that it encompasses normal people now, one of the most inclusive labels of all time. Elon said when far left legacy media refers to the far right, they actually mean centrists. Peter Sweden said remigration isn't far right, it's actually completely normal. Elon said, true. Peter Sweden said a new poll from Denmark found that over 70% of people want to deport foreigners that have been convicted of a crime. This confirms that remigration isn't far right. It's a completely normal opinion, and Elon reposted it. And let's hear from Scott Bessent.
My worry is that the Fed is turning into universal basic income for PhD economists. Right. That I don't know what they do. They're never right. If you were to
maybe you should double the number of PhDs. If you go to 700, they might get it right.
Well look. I mean, if you were to look at the central value tendency versus how they've done, it's shocking.
Right.
It's shocking. You know, I said, like, if air traffic controllers did this, no one would get in an airplane.
And Elon said, true. And C3 says, if you think the fraud in Minnesota is bad, wait until you see the fraud in Illinois and the fraud in California and the fraud in New York and the fraud in Oregon and the fraud in Maryland and the fraud in Washington and the fraud in every Democrat-run state in America. Elon said California, New York, and Illinois have vastly highly fraud, and it is aided and abetted by the state. And in a stunning statement, Democrat Hennepin County Attorney Mary claims the Department of Justice is attempting to politicize a sexual assault prosecution to inflict further harm on our entire Somali community. In the statement, Moriarty defends her office's failure to secure any prison time for serial rapist Mohammed. Jenna says twice convicted rapist Mohammed gets 0 prison time in Minnesota for gunpoint rape of a 15-year-old and sex assault of another woman. And then the county attorney says, politicizing this harms our Somali community. And Elon reposted that. And an enormously fat polar bear that has been gorging itself on the carcass of a whale on the coast of Norway. And Elon reposted that. And Jeffrey Mead says that calling Elon a hoarder is economically illiterate. He is not sitting on cash. His wealth is equity in companies that actively spend capital every day on jobs, factories, and research and development. Taxing that means forcing share sales and weakening productive firms. The US government already takes in nearly $5 trillion per year. If that is not enough to solve poverty, Elon is not the bottleneck. Elon says, I build a lot of things. And he also said, exactly. Now it's time for our daily Grok Imagine slideshow where I show you all of the Imagine creations Elon reposted today. So that's everything that Elon said today. Satellites will have local AI compute where the results are beamed back to Earth. And if we want to accelerate our AI compute, Elon suggests satellite factories on the moon, and instead of launching them into orbit with rockets, we'll use mass drivers to get them into orbit. He said that could lead to 100 terawatts a year of AI. And someone ran the math on those numbers and he was like, that's a lot of Starship launches. And someone quoted Elon saying he once said that there'll be 24 Starship launches per day. That's one every hour. And he said if you're not aiming for an exawatt, you're not even trying. We also saw EU members trying to get the address of random X users so that they could sue them, and a massive polar bear eating a rotting carcass whale on the coast of Norway. So that's all for today, and if you guys want early access to these daily videos, you can gain access by joining this channel as a member. It's the absolute best way to support this channel, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.